Have you ever questioned everything you believed about life and death? I used to dismiss those existential thoughts, thinking my world was predictable and grounded in the here and now. I was David Thompson, an unassuming guy with a decent career, a comfortable home, and a carefully planned future. On the surface, life seemed fulfilling, but beneath all my accomplishments, a quiet emptiness lingered. An ache I couldn't name or explain. Sometimes I'd stare at the ceiling late at night, wondering if I was missing something essential. I buried that feeling most days, convincing myself it was just a passing phase or a midlife restlessness. Little did I know that emptiness was a signal, a whisper pointing me toward a reality far beyond anything I'd ever imagined. The day that changed my life began just like any other. I woke up, checked my emails, and gulped down coffee while half listening to the news. I remember feeling an odd tightness in my chest that morning. It wasn't exactly painful, but it was insistent, like a warning I shrugged off. I told myself it was nothing, maybe stress or too much caffeine. By lunchtime, it was stronger, making me dizzy. I called my doctor, but the receptionist said it would take a week to get an appointment. I sighed, hung up, and promised myself I'd go to the emergency room if it got worse. Work responsibilities took over, and I let the moment pass. Late that afternoon, I found myself in a conference room, giving a presentation I'd rehearsed 100 times. The words were coming out of my mouth, but my mind was somewhere else, fixated on this persistent, throbbing sensation in my chest. I felt hot, then cold, and then all at once, the room began to spin. I heard someone shout my name, but it sounded distant, like I was underwater. My vision blurred, and I collapsed. The last thing I recall being the frantic pounding of footsteps and terrified voices around me. When I came to, something seemed off. There was no fluorescent hospital light, no beeping machines. In fact, there was nothing familiar at all. Instead, I felt as though I'd been plunged into some realm of weightless calm. I realized I was somehow hovering outside my own body. I could see people trying to resuscitate me, paramedics rushing in, coworkers looking on with horror. I should have felt panic, but a serene acceptance washed over me. This wasn't anything I could explain rationally. It was both surreal and strangely comforting. I remember thinking, so this is it? Oh, sorry. Is this where life ends? Time felt warped, stretching and folding in on itself. Moments turned fluid, and in that floating stillness, I saw what I can only describe as a radiant light. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, inviting, and unbelievably beautiful. My first reaction was awe. I drifted toward it, drawn by a sensation of love more powerful and pure than anything I had ever experienced. It was like stepping into a gentle embrace that had always been waiting for me. The emptiness I'd carried for so long vanished. In its place rose a profound feeling of belonging. At some point, my awareness sharpened. Within that light, I sensed a presence. Someone familiar, yet so far beyond my everyday understanding. I felt the essence of Jesus Christ standing before me. I can't say I saw every detail of his face like a photograph, but I knew who he was with unwavering certainty. The moment I recognized him, a wave of indescribable peace flowed over me. All the questions and doubts I'd harbored about religion, spirituality, the afterlife, were momentarily irrelevant. In his presence, I felt a deep acceptance that erased any fear of judgment. It was as though every burden I'd carried my whole life melted away in a single heartbeat. I don't remember exactly how we communicated, whether it was in words or an unspoken understanding, but there was a clarity to it that surpassed normal speech. It felt as if he knew me entirely. My hopes, my failures, the times I prayed half-heartedly, and the times I forgot to pray at all. Despite everything, I sensed only compassion. The love I felt in that encounter was so profound that it brought tears to my eyes. Even though I wasn't in a physical body as I knew it, I remember thinking, this is what home feels like. This is where I belong. While I was basking in that incredible peace, something else began to unfold. Jesus seemed to be showing me scenes, almost like glimpses of what was yet to come. He conveyed that our world would face chaotic times, and he spoke specifically of 2025. I couldn't grasp all the details in that moment, but I sensed these challenges would test humanity's resilience and faith in ways we hadn't seen before. With a gentleness I can't fully describe, he emphasized the importance of prayer as not just a ritual, but a true lifeline. In that luminous space, words like prayer took on new meaning. It wasn't about repeating memorized lines or begging for favors. It felt more like an open channel, an intimate conversation with the divine that could reshape hearts, minds, and even circumstances. I remember an overwhelming certainty that prayer would be absolutely pivotal in the times ahead, both for individual strength and for collective healing. There was a powerful sense that it could unite people across distances, transcending barriers and bringing solace where nothing else could. Before I realized what was happening, Jesus was speaking directly into my heart about prayer's capacity to transform reality. It wasn't a loud, commanding voice. It was more like a gentle breath or a steady heartbeat that resonated with truth. The message came in waves of understanding. Prayer was not a last resort or a final plea in desperate moments. It was meant to be the very foundation of each day, an ongoing connection that keeps us aligned with God's will. I felt unmistakably that prayer was going to be our anchor in the uncertainties looming on the horizon. Even as I soaked in this revelation, I felt a pull, like something was tugging me away from that realm of light. Part of me clung to it desperately, not wanting to lose the sense of belonging and the perfect peace. Another part recognized that my journey on earth wasn't finished. I didn't want to leave, yet I understood I had to go back. And in that gentle but inevitable moment, everything shifted again. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped steadily. My throat felt raw, and my body ached as if it had been through a war. For a few seconds, I couldn't piece together what had happened. Then, the reality of it all struck me. I had flatlined, or at least come close to death, for those few critical minutes. The doctors called it a cardiac event, possibly triggered by an undiagnosed heart issue. I could see relief on their faces. They had somehow managed to revive me. But no one, not even the medical staff, could fully comprehend what I'd just experienced. I didn't entirely understand it myself. Lying there, tears slid down my cheeks, without warning. I was overwhelmed by gratitude for the second chance at life, for the revelation I'd received, and for the love I'd tasted in that radiant realm. Nurses came and went, adjusting IVs and taking vitals, but I was in another world internally. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind, the light, the presence, and Jesus' insistence on the power of prayer. Every doubt I once had about the afterlife, or the reality of a higher power, was replaced by this unshakable conviction that I'd truly encountered something divine. I spent days in the hospital, recovering, physically weakened, but spiritually awakened. My doctor insisted on more tests, an extended rest, and a list of medications to support my heart. Friends and family called, visited, and messaged. They said I looked different, calmer, more at peace. They spoke of a glow in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I tried to put what I'd experienced into words, but found myself stumbling. How do you describe an encounter that shook the foundation of your entire being? Once I was stable enough to go home, life felt strangely new. The things that once seemed paramount, job deadlines, material comfort, petty concerns, started to feel small. My first morning back, I woke up early and instinctively began to pray. It wasn't formal or scripted. I simply poured my heart out, speaking as if Jesus was right there with me. Tears flowed again, but they were tears of warmth and gratitude. I realized I had spent so many years treating prayer like a side note, or an emergency button, only pressing it when times were dire. Now I wanted it to be my first step in everything, my way of staying tethered to that profound love I'd felt. A few weeks later, I remembered the glimpses of the future Jesus had shown me. The memory hovered at the edge of my consciousness like a half-forgotten dream. But one thing remained clear. The message about prayer's significance in the face of coming challenges. I found myself revisiting that moment in the light, recalling how deeply he emphasized that prayer would be crucial for navigating what lay ahead in 2025. While I didn't have a detailed blueprint for these chaotic times, I carried a sense of urgency and hope. Prayer would be our collective safeguard. Curiosity drove me to learn more. I spent evenings researching near-death experiences, reading accounts from people of various faiths and backgrounds, who claimed to have met spiritual figures or encountered divine love. Some stories mirrored my own, while others were vastly different. But one recurring theme shone through: the profound impact of prayer and the universal call to connect with something greater than ourselves. Every time I read another person's story, I felt less alone. I sensed we were all drawing from the same well, guided by a love that transcends borders and beliefs. Prayer became my daily practice. Morning, noon, and night, I opened my heart, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. I started noticing changes in my mindset: less anxiety, less fixation on trivial conflicts, more compassion for the people around me. Even simple interactions felt infused with a kind of gentle awareness. I would find myself silently praying for strangers I passed on the street, wishing them peace and healing. That might sound strange to some, but in that silent act, I felt connected to them and to God in a way I never thought possible. The transformative power of prayer also revealed itself in unexpected moments. One morning, a close friend called in distress about losing his job. I listened, prayed silently for him, and offered words of hope rather than the usual cursory advice. A few weeks later, he found an even better position, and he credited our conversation and the prayers for restoring his optimism. Another time, I faced a major financial scare, but instead of spiraling into panic, I prayed for clarity. Within days, a solution surfaced that I could have never anticipated. Each time something like this happened, it felt like a gentle reminder of the promise Jesus had shared. That prayer was more than just comfort. It was a proactive force we could rely on. Strangely, I began noticing how many other people were also seeking a deeper connection. Even those who called themselves skeptical or agnostic were open to discussing spiritual concepts when approached with kindness and sincerity. Something was stirring in the air. More and more, I heard individuals speak about the feeling that the world was on the brink of major transformations, whether because of social changes, environmental issues, or personal crises. People sensed that life as we knew it was shifting. Some felt afraid, some felt excited, but almost everyone seemed to feel that the status quo was unraveling. In the back of my mind, I kept recalling what Jesus had shared about the future. He mentioned societal challenges, testing the fabric of our faith and resilience. And yet, he offered no ominous doom or finality, just a strong reminder that prayer would guide us through it. That gave me hope, a sense that no matter how dark the days ahead might become, there was a light that wouldn't fade. Whenever I felt a twinge of fear or uncertainty, I would close my eyes and remember the warmth of that radiant realm, the profound love, and how prayer bridged my heart to a divine source of strength. I started sharing my experience with a few close friends, expecting skepticism or raised eyebrows. To my surprise, many were intrigued. A friend of mine, who'd always been dismissive of religion, suddenly confessed that she'd been feeling a pull to explore spirituality. Another friend, a lifelong churchgoer, told me he'd never heard anyone talk about prayer in such a living, breathing way. He said it made him realize that prayer wasn't about formality or fear, but about relationship. Each conversation ignited a spark, and those sparks made me realize something. People everywhere are hungry for real connection, both with each other and with God. Little by little, I found myself talking about what I'd seen and felt during my near-death experience. I was no preacher, nor did I want to be, but I found that speaking from a place of simple honesty resonated more than any polished sermon could. I described the overwhelming sense of acceptance in Jesus' presence, how he wasn't this distant figure waiting to judge, but a compassionate guide, calling us to a deeper understanding of love. and I talked about how he specifically underscored the significance of prayer in 2025, hinting at times ahead that would make us question our resilience. As the months rolled by, I noticed a shift in my personal relationships. Some people drew closer, intrigued by the change they saw in me. Others distanced themselves, wary of my newfound focus on faith and prayer. It hurt to lose some connections, but I made peace with it, trusting that everyone has their own path. I learned that you can't force spiritual insight on anyone. The best you can do is embody it, letting your life quietly testify to the power of what you've experienced. I tried to lead with kindness, remembering how I felt in that radiant light, completely known and unconditionally loved. Eventually, I began sharing more publicly, writing short reflections online, talking about how prayer had become an integral part of my day. People from various backgrounds responded. Some had never prayed before, yet found themselves curious. Others had prayed their whole lives, but admitted they'd lost the passion or the sense of presence in it. We started to realize we weren't alone in feeling that something bigger was unfolding. It seemed the more we talked about it, the more people wanted to learn, to connect, to pray, not as a rule-bound duty, but as a living, evolving conversation with a loving creator. That's when I felt a tug to create a space where people could share their experiences and pray together. It started small, just a handful of friends on a video call, each from different parts of the country. We'd exchange stories, reflect on the week's challenges, and pray for one another. It was incredible to feel the collective warmth, even through a screen. We'd finish those calls with lighter hearts, renewed energy, and a sense of real community. The group began to grow as friends invited other friends. Soon, I was getting messages from strangers across the globe who heard about our virtual gatherings and wanted to join. In every session, we found reasons for gratitude, even in the midst of personal trials, family illnesses, or global turmoil. One man, who'd been struggling with addiction, discovered that daily prayer and the support our small community gave him the courage to seek professional help. Another woman said she'd battled anxiety for years, but after embracing prayer as a dialogue with God, rather than a desperate plea, she felt her anxiety diminish. These stories reaffirmed what I'd learned in my near-death encounter. Prayer doesn't just console, it transforms. All along, I carried the quiet reminder of the year 2025. Each time I prayed, I asked for guidance on how best to prepare. I didn't receive a step-by-step roadmap, but I sensed a peaceful assurance that if we rooted ourselves in prayer, we'd find the wisdom and strength to navigate whatever came in. The more I leaned into that truth, the less fear gripped me. I understood that life would always have uncertainties, whether in 2025 or in any other year. But uncertainty didn't have to paralyze me, because prayer anchored my heart in a love that was greater than any problem or crisis. As word spread about my experience, I began receiving personal stories from people who had also faced near-death situations or profound spiritual moments. They described encounters with an indescribable light, with angelic beings, or even with loved ones who had passed on. The specifics varied, but they all shared that same sense of unconditional love and acceptance. Reading their testimonies felt like receiving postcards from a faraway place we'd all visited. I saw how these stories transcended cultural and religious barriers. Some wrote from Christian backgrounds, others from different faiths, and a few with no formal belief system at all. Yet the essence remained consistent, a love that superseded judgment, urging us to care for one another and maintain a genuine connection with the divine through prayer or meditation. At times, I'd question whether my encounter might have been a hallucination or a figment of my brain in crisis. But then I'd recall the vivid clarity of the light, the undeniable presence of Jesus, and the profound truths I couldn't have simply fabricated. Besides, the transformation in my day-to-day life was real. My perspective had shifted in ways logic couldn't easily dismiss. I cherished my relationships more deeply. I found renewed passion in helping others. My capacity for empathy grew. All these changes felt like natural outcomes of an authentic spiritual experience, not a passing delusion. People often asked if the Jesus I met was the same Jesus portrayed in religious texts, I can only describe him as the embodiment of love, acceptance, and wisdom, far beyond any stereotype or limited portrayal. He didn't berate me for my failings or demand unwavering perfection. Instead, he illuminated a path where prayer was the key to growing and aligning with divine love. I emerged from that encounter without a condescending certainty that I had all the answers, but with a humble conviction that prayer truly is the heartbeat of a spiritual life, especially in tumultuous times. Looking back, my life before the near-death experience feels like it belonged to someone else. I was walking a path defined by routine, ambition, and quiet dissatisfaction. I had no idea how important it was to nurture a spiritual dimension in everyday life. Now I see everything is interconnected. Prayer isn't just a religious practice. It's a bridge between our hearts and the boundless grace that sustains us. When Jesus spoke to me in that radiant space, he wasn't doling out hollow promises. He was revealing how we could stand firm despite impending challenges, by grounding ourselves in a daily, heartfelt communion with God. Over time, I started to notice that when I prayed, my intentions shifted. I became less focused on what I thought I needed or wanted, and more receptive to guidance. It wasn't about forcing outcomes, but trusting a divine orchestration that often exceeded my limited vision. For instance, when I'd pray about an issue at work, new opportunities or solutions emerged in ways I couldn't have orchestrated alone. When I prayed for family members struggling with their health, doors opened to better treatments and emotional support. And in each of these instances, it felt like I was cooperating with a flow of grace rather than trying to wrestle control away from life's natural currents. Because of these changes, people asked for prayer requests more frequently. I tried my best to honor each one, believing that even a simple, heartfelt prayer could spark hope and healing. What impressed me was how prayer also ignited compassion. It motivated me to take practical actions, to call a lonely neighbor, to volunteer at shelters, to share resources with those in need. This taught me that prayer isn't an escape from reality. It's what empowers us to engage reality with clarity and love. Curiosity about others' stories drove me to compile their experiences, both miraculous and everyday. Friends began confiding in me, some about remarkable moments of synchronicity, others about small but significant answers to prayer they'd witnessed. As a result, the sense of community grew. We realized that prayer ties us together in an invisible tapestry. The more we shared, the more robust that tapestry became, weaving in stories of redemption, second chances, and renewed faith. It was as though all of us were being prepared for a future where spiritual fortitude would be essential. Though I speak about 2025 and its significance, I don't claim to know exactly how events will unfold. My near-death experience didn't come with a timeline or bullet point prophecies. But it did bring a clear message. We're entering a phase where our collective prayers, our unified intention to foster love, empathy, and healing, would be crucial. Whether it's social unrest, natural disasters, or personal crises, prayer will help us navigate these challenges with grace, transforming fear into hope, turmoil into calm, and alienation into connection. As this realization took root, I felt compelled to broaden the community further. Social media proved helpful in gathering people from different parts of the world. We arranged online prayer circles at specific times, inviting anyone who was interested to join from wherever they were. It didn't matter if someone identified as Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or if they had no religious label at all. The point was a collective focus on unity, compassion, and divine guidance. Each time, the feedback was powerful. People felt comforted, uplifted, and more open to the idea that we share a spiritual bond, regardless of our background. Witnessing how these online gatherings impacted real lives made me recall Jesus' words in that radiant space. Prayer is not just about seeking help, but about nurturing our bond with God and with each other. It is a living conversation that shapes who we are and how we move through the world. This has become my day-to-day mantra. Whenever anxiety creeps in, when I worry about finances, relationships, or health, I remember the light the embrace, and the voice urging me to trust that prayer is the key. People sometimes ask if I wish I could go back to that realm of light. Part of me does, because the peace there was beyond compare. But I believe I'm supposed to be here, sharing this story and living out the lessons I learned. Life on earth, with all its imperfections, is still a profound gift. Each sunrise is a reminder that I get another chance to love, to grow, and to forge deeper connections through prayer. Whenever I feel that old emptiness creeping back, I pause and pray, recalling the sense of completeness I had when I felt Jesus' presence. Inevitably, that prayerful moment refills the emptiness with gratitude and reassurance. Over time, I've encountered people who had no interest in spiritual matters, yet found themselves moved by the simple sincerity of my experience. They often come with questions or concerns about the future, worried about world crises or personal struggles. I share what I can, namely, that prayer is a tangible way to channel our fears into faith and direct our hopes into heartfelt intention. I encourage them to just start talking to God in whatever way feels natural. Sometimes they return weeks or months later, saying they've felt a shift, a calm they can't quite explain. Reflecting on this entire journey, I see how my heart attack, or whatever precisely happened physically, was a pivotal moment that led me to a spiritual rebirth. My old perspectives about success and achievement have been replaced by a deeper commitment to compassion, understanding, and daily communication with the divine. I've learned that prayer isn't about formality or perfection. It's about honesty, humility, and a willingness to listen as much as to speak. As more people gather to share their experiences, I've noticed a collective longing, a desire to recapture that sense of wonder we had as children, where everything seemed connected and meaningful. I believe prayer restores that wonder. It breaks through our defenses and our jaded cynicism, reminding us that life is far more expansive than we often allow ourselves to believe. And as 2025 draws nearer, I keep returning to that message. No matter how uncertain the future looks, the power of prayer remains constant. I've now arrived at a place where I feel called to invite others to walk this path with me. There's no special membership needed, just an open heart and a curiosity to explore the depths of spiritual connection. If you have a story about how prayer shaped your life or lifted you in a dark moment, I'd love to hear it. By sharing these stories, we form a tapestry of hope and encouragement, revealing how God's love weaves through every life and every community, often in ways we barely notice at first. I'm also convinced that group prayer amplifies that sense of unity. When we gather, physically or virtually, to align our hearts in prayer, something extraordinary happens. It's as if the boundaries that separate us begin to dissolve. In those moments, we become more aware of each other's struggles and joys, and we hold them together before God. There's a quiet power in that collective act, a reminder that we are never truly alone in our journeys. Looking back, that day in the office feels like another life. The conference room, the worried faces, the stark jolt of collapsing, it all led me to a place of indescribable beauty and a conversation with Jesus that changed me forever. The emptiness I once felt has been replaced by a sense of purpose, a calling to share what I've learned about prayer and the boundless love that undergirds our existence. Though words will never fully capture the experience, I hope sharing my story can spark something within you, whether it's curiosity, comfort, or the drive to open your heart in prayer. I also hope you feel encouraged to engage with others in this spiritual pursuit. Maybe start a small prayer circle with friends, or simply share your testimony online. It might seem like a tiny gesture, but it can be the start of a profound ripple effect. People out there are yearning for a sense of community, for reassurance that there's more to this life than the daily grind. And who knows how your personal story might be the one that someone else needs to hear. All I can say with certainty is this: my encounter taught me that prayer is much more than a set of words. It's a living dialogue, a sacred connection that can reshape not only our individual lives, but the collective atmosphere around us. Whenever doubt creeps in, I remember that radiant light and the feeling of absolute peace. I recall Jesus' gentle voice reminding me that the power of prayer will guide us through any storm, especially in the days to come. And each time I think of that, I'm renewed by an unshakable sense of hope. So I invite you to join me on this journey. If you felt a stirring, an ache, or a curiosity about the deeper realms of life, you're not alone. Consider sharing your thoughts, your questions, or your own experiences. Let us build a community grounded in faith, open dialogue, and prayerful support for one another. If my story resonates with you, I encourage you to reflect on how prayer can become a meaningful part of your everyday routine. Don't wait for the next crisis to seek that connection. Make it a cornerstone of your life now, and watch how it transforms your outlook and interaction. I've come to realize that our bond with God, nurtured through prayer, is one of the most powerful forces in existence. It helps us remain steady when the world seems unsteady. It illuminates our path when circumstances appear dark. It bridges divides we thought were unbridgeable. Most importantly, it reminds us that we are seen, loved, and guided by a presence far more vast than we can comprehend. Even as 2025 approaches with its share of unknowns, I'm at peace because I trust in the promise that prayer connects us to a divine love, ready to sustain and guide us through every challenge. My near-death experience reminded me, prayer is not just about asking for help in dire moments. It's about cultivating a relationship with God that transforms us from the inside out. This relationship infuses our lives with purpose and resilience, making us instruments of compassion in a world that desperately needs it. And now I share this with you, hoping that something in my story prompts you to explore your own capacity for spiritual growth, for heartfelt prayer, and for genuine connection with others walking this path. If you find yourself drawn to this message, I invite you to stay connected, share your own stories, spread the word, and consider joining in whatever communal prayer opportunities arise. We can discover together how these moments of shared intention uplift us all. And if this experience has touched you in any way, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to subscribe or follow along, letting others know that there is hope, there is love, and there is power in prayer. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. With me, may you find peace, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose as we walk hand in hand, guided by faith and united in prayer.